All right, everybody, good afternoon. Are we all ready to begin? I want to thank you for joining us today for the workshop, Navigating Through Cybersecurity in the Business World. My name is Marcia Shuffman, and I'm with the Military and Veterans Resource Center here at the University of West Florida in gorgeous Pensacola, Florida. Today's workshop is the first in a collaborative series between the UWF Military and Veterans Resource Center, the MVRC, and the UWF Center for Cybersecurity. MVRC serves as a leading campus advocate for military dependents and veteran students. This program is funded from a grant from Veterans Florida supporting free entrepreneurial education through the MVRC at UWF for active duty personnel or veterans. As an NSA, DHS National Center of Academic Excellence, Regional Resource Center for the Southeast, the Center for Cybersecurity is one of the preferred partners in the cybersecurity space across Northwest Florida. I'm joined today by Chris Middleton, the President's Military Liaison at the University of West Florida. Chris uses his wealth of experience creating opportunities and partnerships that will enhance the symbiotic relationship between UWF and the military community. Chris, thank you for joining us. Next, I'd like to introduce you to a popular returning presenter, Michelle Ward, who is the CEO from CyberSafe Workforce, LLC. The focus of CyberSafe is on educating the individual employee about how to be cyber aware and cyber safe within the work environment. Her clients are counties, cities, schools, higher ed, and small business. Michelle, thank you again for joining us. Rounding out our panel is Stephen Bazell, representing the Center for Cybersecurity. Stephen served over 10 years in the U.S. Air Force and then became a government contractor for Hurlburt Field. He now serves as the System Server Administrator and Cyber IT Trainer at the Center for Cybersecurity. He began his career in technology with a managed service provider where he spent time building and servicing computers, installing operating systems, and providing critical IT infrastructure. Stephen, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Great. Michelle, we're going to start with you. In your business, CyberSafe Workforce, your focus is on the employee, whether they're in an organization numbering in the thousands or in the single digits. And even then, it's not just the IT department that you're focusing in, but on every employee that touches a computer. So for those listening right now, whether you're an entrepreneur who contracts with an IT firm or has in-house expertise, why should they cover every employee with CyberSafe education? Michelle.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. And to answer your question, there's really two reasons. But first, I want to say that a lot of people in the workplace feel like security is IT's job, right? Technology department's got it. They're the ones who are doing the firewalls and antivirus, and they're keeping computers up to date and fiddling with the settings and so forth. Why should I, as just an employee who might be in accounting or just some other department, worry about cybersecurity? Well, the truth is everybody has a role to play in the cybersecurity of the workplace for two reasons. One is that they're doing work in the workplace. They're touching the information, and some of that information might be confidential to the business. It might be confidential to an individual person because it has personally identifiable information. And so just through the process of working within the environment, they might be, taking a credit card payment for a point of sale system. They are somehow touching information. And so that information, especially if it's confidential or greater, if it's proprietary, et cetera, needs to be protected. The second reason, and you mentioned it, is that they're likely touching some kind of computer system, right? Whether they're checking email, they're working on it day to day, or they're working on maybe a cash register, or even if they're just they're in the work environment, they have some kind of responsibility to help protect those assets. And so, no matter what kind of information security standard or cybersecurity framework, there's always a component of awareness and training. You have to make your employees aware of how to, and train them how to handle information in their job role, so that they're safeguarding it. It's working within the framework that you've established. And in addition, you have to make them aware of things that they might encounter while they're, say, on the computer, or even just, in an environment with a badge door. Can I let the person, come in behind me who doesn't have a badge and, they're not swiping? Of course not. So you have to make them aware of those kinds of things that they might encounter. And, part of the reason why it's a requirement is because it reduces the risk to the business, right? Data breaches, malware, these are costly in terms of time. We've all heard of ransomware, and ransomware can be very disruptive. It can take down a workplace for a period of time or severely limit their capability to just operate. And so it's a risk reduction measure. There's a statistic from the Verizon Data Breach Investigations report. They showed that in 2019, out of the thousands and thousands of data breaches that they studied, 22% of them were caused by phishing. And phishing is when an employee, or is when someone receives a message, could be an email, could be a text message, and it's someone who's pretending to be somebody else, and they're going to trick that employee or that person into giving up access or sending confidential information. And so you can see that employees, in just the course of working every day, they have an effect on the business's information and their ability to operate. I do want to mention as well that if there's anyone who's doing work as a defense contractor now, there's a defense acquisitions regulation that has come out in the past few years, where basically the Defense Department is levying cybersecurity requirements onto contractors. There's a particular clause that deals with covered defense information and controlled unclassified information. And you'll see in the control family that in the information security standards for that clause, there's awareness and training, as well as many other security controls. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. I have another question for you. Now with WHG, work from home guidelines, there have got to be additional concerns in how employees use their computers. So whether they're working from home or they're doing this new 2-week transitional work from home, 2 weeks in the office, 2 weeks from home, how do you address some of the concerns of an entrepreneur? I mean, forgetting the potential for viruses between humans, what are we going to do about swapping computer viruses between home networks and also work networks?
Yeah, so I would say that any time that you can separate work from personal, like whether that's allowing employees to take home a work computer, that is best, right? You definitely don't want to mix personal use and work use in the same computer if you can. And I know there are situations where you can't. And the reason for that is, yes, one can really affect the other. If, say, an employee is working on the same computer doing work items and personal items, and they're not using a separate profile, or work hasn't provided them like a secure way to tunnel in to work, like a VPN, then, like, say typically at work social media sites are blocked, but now this person's working from home and they're on social media, and maybe they click on an attachment on a post or a file on a post that actually has malware. Well, now that malware is affecting the entire computer where they're also doing work. So those are things to think about. Anytime you can keep the separation, you should. You also need to be very clear with your workforce on how you expect them to work from home, and consider that they may have to use their own device. You'll have to consider how are they connecting. You need to take into account things that they may try to do to make it easier for themselves to work from home. For example, what if somebody thinks, okay, well, I got to get all this work done, but I'm not allowed to take my computer home, or I can't connect to work email or whatever from home. I'll just forward all of my work emails to my personal email account. And now we have a pretty scary situation, because if their personal email account gets hacked, their password gets phished, now that person has access to all of their work emails, potentially resetting passwords for their work accounts and so forth. So there are a lot of things to take into account. Try to be very clear with your workforce on how you expect them to connect, how you expect them to do work, and keep the feedback lines open so that if they say, oh, I can't comply with that security control and here's why, you can provide a workaround or additional monitoring and detection solutions, for them or in that situation.
A lot to think about. Okay.
Yeah.
So, can you give me a couple of takeaways that are going to make me cyber safer, and perhaps a lot of the folks who are watching right now?
Yes, I've got two, and I feel like these are the biggest ones. The first one is two-step login. Two-step login everywhere you can, especially email, because that's like the gateway to your other accounts. So what I mean is it's that additional login step, and all major email providers, social networks, they all have them. Just go into your password settings and look for like the two-step login. Sometimes it's called second login step or multi-factor authentication, but basically it's like, typically it's another code that you have on like your phone or some other device that you have. So after you log in, you'll be asked to provide that code, and it updates every 30 seconds or so. And so that way, in case you get tricked into handing over your password, or because you reused password and some other account got hacked, they can't get into your accounts because of that second login step. The second thing I would advise people on is just be aware of suspicious messages. And here's what I mean. And this is kind of like email safety, but you can use it for text messages as well. Anytime you get an email or a text message that you did not expect to get, you need to, and it's asking you to do something like go to a website, open up a file, respond with some information. You need to, hit pause and take a look at it more carefully. Who sent it to you? Do you recognize the email address? So here's an example. Let's say, I'm the boss of my workplace, but say I had a boss. Let's say we're all working from home again, unfortunately, because cases are spiking. And then I get an email from my boss that says I need to go to a website and fill out some information because she's going to submit for, an economic stimulus thing for the business. And I need to do it tonight. It's that important. Of course, I'm going to feel like, oh, I got to get this done. It's from my boss. But I didn't expect to get that communication. She never talked about it before now. So I'm going to look and see who sent it. Now, if it's from Michelle at cybersafeworkforce.com, I'll say, oh, okay, well, it's from her, but I'm still going to pick up the phone and call to make sure. Two, if it didn't say Michelle at cybersafeworkforce.com, it said Michelle123@gmail.com, I can immediately say this is probably a scam because this is not her email address. It doesn't have anything to do with work. I can probably delete it. But again, if I feel like I need to respond to it, I should verify. That way I'm not tricked into going out to a website where it's asking me for my social security number, my address, my date of birth, and other pieces of information that can be used in identity theft. So always, if you didn't expect to get a message and it's asking you to do something, make a payment, whatever, you need to hit the brakes and really look and see who sent it to me. If I still feel kind of icky about it, I need to verify. Verify with contact information you already have, and that'll keep you relatively safe from getting scammed.
I think that's very useful information. Those are two great takeaways. Thanks. Appreciate it. All right, Michelle. So moving on, we're going to talk to Stephen Bizel. And I want to continue with this thread, talking about what the director of the Center for Cybersecurity, Dr. Rayman Al-Sheikh, now refers to as the new normal. Specifically, if we could discuss what are some of the issues or needs, Stephen, that you all have been addressing in our region, Northwest Florida, as a result of this new normal.
Absolutely. Like Ms. Ward pointed out, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we were all mostly working from home. Most of us probably still working from home or slowly transitioning back to the office. Now, malicious actors, or hackers, as most of us would refer to them as, they saw this as an opportunity to gain access to systems more easily than they were able to before. All the support and protection our enterprise environment was affording us is now limited or non-existent. We became wonderfully comfortable, complacent even, when working from home. Our corporate environment has safeguards in place that protect us against malware, phishing, hacking attempts, so on and so forth. But at home, not so much. At best, most of us only have basic consumer equipment running on our home networks. We don't have $10,000 or $30,000 firewalls and $50,000 security analysis appliances running on our home network. And some of us still need those connections back to our corporate network just to do our daily functions. So how can we ensure the security of these outside connections, which are now us, back into the corporate network? So this poses a whole new challenge to IT and cybersecurity personnel everywhere. Even at the university, we were seeing differences between, okay, well, before the COVID-19 pandemic, you had only maybe a small handful or a very limited number of people that were having to remote into systems at work. And then when everybody started working from home, it was an increase by a factor of 10 or more in some corporate environments. So everything changed almost overnight. And right along with what Ms. Ward just explained, the best weapon against malicious activity is our own self and our training. So before the summer began, one thing that we actually touched on in our new normal webinar was our children had to finish up schooling from home. Almost all schools closed down, said, okay, your kids have to go home. We're going to send you packets. We're going to send you information. You're going to have to figure out this homeschooling thing for the last few months. And as much time as our children spend online as it already is, they were spending even more time interacting with new tools and new technologies in order to finish up the school year. And that exposes them to more threats or threat potential than they had before. So some people think cybersecurity awareness and training is just for adults or IT professionals, but nothing could really be further from the truth. We needed training, and our children need training all the same. Now, we touched on some of these tips and suggestions during our new normal webinar, pointing out things that most parents kind of just let slide or never really thought about when it came to their children being on the internet. And our new normal requires us to increase our cybersecurity awareness throughout our daily activities, almost just as if we were at work, but focused on what our cyber vulnerabilities may be at home, since we're in a completely different environment. We should also feel free to communicate with our IT staff at work, even though we're working at home. Asking them for some tips or assistance on how to best connect to the network while at home, but in a safe manner, helps everyone. And if your IT staff know that you're trying to work with them, then they're more able to help you and might put your ticket at the top of the queue as well.
Okay, I think that's always good advice, to be respectful and gracious, and yes, especially if you want to receive better service from people. So that's always great. Going towards a different angle here, is there an increased demand for cyber education from the center by students or by employers or even by veterans?
Yes, there is definitely an increased demand for cyber education across the board, both academic and professional. The last figures that I saw from the Department of Homeland Security and the NSA showed that the rate of the increased demand for cyber professionals in the next 10 years outpaces the rate at which our educational production can actually meet. So to sum it up, there is a greater demand for cyber professionals than there are people to actually fill those voids. More and more businesses are realizing the need to put more emphasis on cybersecurity than ever before, with all of the phishing scams, all of the ransomware attacks that we've seen in the news in just the last 2 to 3 years. And demand in the cyber professionals in the DoD sector have also seen a huge increase, rightfully so. In 2018, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is a continuation of the National Protection and Programs Directorate, that's a mouthful, say that 5 times fast. But the CISA, we'll say, was signed into law in 2018, and there's been a huge increase in job listings for the cyber professionals. Many of them come with the direct hire authority, meaning if anybody's ever experienced the government hiring process, it's usually a very long, very drawn out process. It's not I give you my resume, a couple weeks later we have an interview, the next day I get an offer letter. These processes take a very, very long time. So with direct hire authority, it's always saying, hey, look, we have a huge demand in cyber professionals. Let's find a way to hire them quicker. And so that process is expedited compared to the traditional hiring process. I've even seen temporary positions that are just to fill the gaps due to the COVID-19 pandemic. They're usually 1 to 2 years. But I've seen a lot of cyber professional job listings on places like USA Jobs. And on the commercial side of things, we've seen an increase in companies looking for both more advanced training for their cyber personnel, as well as general cybersecurity awareness training for all employees. So we have that separation of, okay, well, businesses are starting to realize everyone needs some form of basic cyber awareness. And if they can find a way to even better train their IT and currently hired cyber personnel, that's all the better, because some of this training you can't just take a class or two at a university to get.
You know, it's interesting, you were mentioning a moment ago about almost a rapid hire. Is there a preference given for veterans or from graduates from the Center for Cybersecurity, which is a regional center of excellence?
It's a very across the board. I've seen job listings, they're looking for people that can improve the experience. Some of these job listings, they don't even have an educational component, which anybody that's seen some government listings, a lot of them have some educational requirements when you start getting up in certain pay grades. Now, along with that, there are positions that give preference to veterans. So there's veterans preference. So if you are a honorably separated vet, you get, say, extra points towards the hiring process. If you're a disabled vet, depending on your rating, you can get even more points based off of that. So I would suggest anybody looking toward that avenue, really go look and see what is out there, because it changes almost every day. There are some listings that last for a year because they're looking at hiring 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 people. And then there are some listings that last only a week because they're only looking for 1 or 2 very specialized individuals to fill a very specific role. And sometimes they're hired under different processes, whether it be this job is open to anyone, or we're looking specifically for disabled vets, or spouses of deceased vets, or recent graduates, just so on and so forth. So yes, along with the increase in the need for these personnel, some of those do come with some hiring preferences.
So, Stephen, you and I discussed earlier that I had a workshop yesterday and it was all about military transitioning into the civilian workforce. One of the things on the slide that I had up there, the very first thing, was to get badging or get certification or get the appropriate kind of credential to prove that you know what you know. Does UWF help with that?
Say that last part again. I apologize. You broke it.
I'm wondering, when you've got a military who is transitioning out, and perhaps they do have some cyber background, do they need some type of certification or badging to prove to perhaps someone in the civilian workforce that they know what they know?
Oh, right. It all depends.
Okay.
In the military, any of those that are veterans or listening or current active duty may be able to attest to this. But it wasn't until somewhat recently that some military positions actually started requiring those military members to actually get certifications. So especially when I was active duty, there were a lot of times where here is your job. You'll go get training and you will go do it. But many times they didn't require any certifications. And so even though I have work experience in the military doing certain things, whether it be networking or security or OS hardening or data center maintenance and infrastructure, so on and so forth, there are some jobs that require certain proof for that. For example, when I got out and I was looking for a job, and I was looking for jobs kind of all over the place, but in my experience, I was looking for IT and cybersecurity related positions. And the job that I was able to get at Hurlburt Field required a Security Plus. It was a government contracting position, and there was no way around it. Even though my resume, and even after the interview with the team lead and other employees I would be working with, they said, yes, he definitely has the experience. They could not hire me until I got a Security Plus. And I studied, took the test over at Eglin Air Force Base, and next week I had the job. Started my first day.
Okay. Tagging on to this concept of transitioning, and again, I got your permission earlier to discuss this. What were some of the experience that you had, because you did transition relatively easily into a civilian job? Did you have other sort of social learning? I mean, the framework that you had in the military was no longer there. And so did you have to learn about perhaps a different way of valuing things? Did you have to learn different manners of speech? I mean, we were going through the resume translators yesterday, and they were kind of funny, but literally you need a translator to talk about some of the military experiences into civilians. So yes, you definitely had that experience as well.
Yes, during my transition, there were several workshops that the Air Force actually gives separating members, and I actually found them very helpful.
Okay.
A lot of people look at them as, oh, it's just this boring set of classes that I have to spend a whole week going to. But there's actually a lot of really good information in those workshops, and like what you were saying is, you almost need a resume translator, because especially depending on how long you're in the military, you now speak the lingo. We're used to all of the acronyms. We're used to being able to say ops tempo and infosec and all of these words that most people in the civilian sector have no clue what they are. They think we're speaking an entirely different language.
Oh, you are.
And yeah, and I had to learn, and there was a resume writing workshop that I found extremely helpful, because depending on what area you're looking to get hired into, I was looking at jobs both in the civilian market as well as the government market. So I had to actually write 2 different resumes, and obviously you could write a resume almost per the job, but I had to write one resume where I was allowed to put a lot of the lingo still in there, because these were government contracting jobs. These were people that understood what I was saying. And yet I had another resume I had to write and translate everything. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the other specialized training we may get, depending on what branch of service you're in, especially when you become an NCO and you're supervising other subordinates and you're in charge of an entire team or entire office, things of that nature, we have these classes that we take, and something like NCO Academy. Almost everybody in the military knows NCO Academy. Oh, I know what that is. Yeah. Well, the civilian has no idea what the NCO Academy is. They're just like, okay, so you went to an academy for something. So we have to find a way to translate, well, what did the NCO Academy actually teach me? Maybe I can change that into, okay, well, I took something where it was a, maybe leadership training or advanced leadership techniques or so on and so forth. So that way, someone reading my resume can read that and go, oh, he's had supervisory training, like actual training and experience. Okay, great. And so it was extremely helpful being able to get assistance with being able to provide that information on both avenues, and also to understand, being wholly enveloped in the world of the military, transitioning out, the civilian world is completely different now. And you have to know how to cope with that and how they're going to perceive what you bring to them. So I found those workshops extremely helpful. And I would encourage anyone that, even if it's mandatory, definitely go and be prepared to learn. If they're not mandatory, still go take them. There may be one little bit of information that could really help you.
Thank you so much for giving us your personal experience and also information about the Cybersecurity Center there. So now I'm going to switch hats. I'm going to put on my business owner hat, and I'm going to ask you, give me 2 reasons when or why I should call the Center for Cybersecurity.
Well, we have a fantastic team of experts working at the center. We have some that are pulling apart actual real live malware and studying how it was designed. Where did it come from? What were they trying to attack? What vulnerabilities were they trying to exploit? We have other researchers that are looking at methods of performing cyber forensics, new threat hunting techniques, and others researching SCADA infrastructure. We actually have one faculty member, he's even working with a car manufacturer, whose name I will not expose, that builds self-driving cars. So there are a lot of other areas where people are going, hey, we're building this new technology. We should probably make it secure. So we have a bunch of experts that really know their stuff. And we also offer courses that you're not going to find anywhere else, even in a typical university classroom. And because of our expertise and our flexibility, it's possible for us to develop classes that are focused on specific business or customer demands. And we're much more flexible than what you would typically find in the classical university department. That's why we call ourselves the Center for Cybersecurity, because we are UWF, but we also are looking at new ways of educating businesses, individuals. We're reaching out. We have a lot of faculty doing grant work, cutting edge research and technology that can benefit everyone.
You guys are doing a lot of really cool stuff, that's for sure. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to, you're welcome. We're going to move on to Chris Middleton. And what Chris does that is really interesting is Chris takes the assets that we already have here in Northwest Florida, and he creates collaborations with government, defense, military, and it's the synergy from that that acts as an economic force multiplier. Can you speak to that, Chris?
Sure, and thank you for including me in this. And you were describing the perspective for this short portion is from the business side. And what I'd like to do is share a screen here, and I'm going to go over, the host needs to let me share real quick.
Sorry about that. Hold on.
And
You should have it right now.
Okay. There you go. So what we provide as a service from the military liaison side is a general understanding of the portfolio, and for entrepreneurs on this call to have a sense or even a reminder of exactly what is in our area, what could we be accessing through contracts or working as subs, and if you're a service disabled, veteran owned, or 8A of any sort, and what those targets could be. So the university has a Office of Military Engagement. It also has the flagship, which is the Military Veteran Resource Center, and other pieces as well. When we look at Florida, the Office of Military Engagement, brief the business owners, and in this case, entrepreneurs, what is that portfolio? And this is through the Enterprise Florida Network, and you can look up Enterprise Florida on the website and pull down in our area there in the Panhandle. And sometimes it's a good reminder that it's not just Pensacola, it's not just the Blue Angels, or it's not just Eglin or Hurlburt, but it's this collection, all of which have some cybersecurity play. And then taken in whole, there's even greater opportunity and access. So working from the upper corner, you certainly know Pensacola and NAS and Corey Station. Scale is important. Corey Station has 4,100 graduates every year. Horry Station also has DHS, CISA, CISA, which Stephen also alluded to. It has the Center for Information Warfare Training, CWIT. It also has a NIOC, which is an operational information operations command netted under U.S. Cyber Command. And then when you get over to Whiting and you have all the aviation fields, aviation is full of cyber. And if you move over to the east and you look at Hurlburt and Eglin, you certainly have the special operations piece. But at Eglin, not only do you have the normal flying wings under the 96, but you have the research lab and the life cycle management command and cutting edge aircraft. So there's work everywhere. As we break it down, service helps. Being reminded that NAS Pensacola also has a significant Coast Guard presence is helpful. And then moving forward, whatever Space Force brings us through Space Florida and what would be not only the education component that's required for future Space Force members, but all the contracting that comes with that. For Tyndall Air Force Base, though a little ways to the east, that is the base of the future. It has received its congressional funding, excess of $1 billion, and it'll continue for several years. It's part of the Hurricane Michael rebuild, but it's also going to end up with a significant fiber node because it is going to be part of the Joint Gulf Test Range. So big fiber node means big cybersecurity work. For our veterans, we know we're part of the job footprint. And if we are going to grow businesses as entrepreneurs or as subcontractors, if we're small, just understanding the density is important and realizing that the Northwest is a great place for federal work and contractors. And should you be trying to draw work from another part of the state or somewhere in the Southeast, you can certainly point to this and go, hey, don't think that only Charleston or Fort Gordon or Austin, Texas or San Antonio is a place. We're a place too. So for entrepreneurs, some have heard, some have not, but I would offer, if you're in a position with the right business credentials, tax ID numbers, et cetera, and you're in a position to hire, however small, you can use DoD Skill Bridge to bring an employee on board that's still in the service. So as a small or very small company, if you're an army of one there as a brand new entrepreneur, as long as you're a standing business, this opportunity is to, with a series of validations, so it's got to be tested and signed off by the current service members' chain of command, but you can bring a particular service member 6 months before they exit into your company. And the payment day to day comes from their active duty side, as is their healthcare and other overheads. So you're essentially getting an employee for free for 6 months, and you must absolutely be able to hire them when they're done, or the program's not valid. So there's some checks and balances to prevent anybody from taking advantage of the service member in the last 6 months. But if there's a real job out there, what an incredible way to draw current talent and lots of checks and balances, ethical and otherwise, so they can't do their active duty work in your space and vice versa. But to be able to bring, as a veteran, other active duty in with their skill sets and get them trained up while not even paying them yet is a pretty incredible offering from federal. And that's called DoD Skill Bridge, and we can help you with that. Another discussion from the office that we brief routinely is make sure as an entrepreneur that you are scanning the military spouse market, because with all the service members that you might be accessing their talent or perhaps their security clearance, remember that you've got this base of military spouses spanning in the thousands, and those spouses come within a library or a spectrum of professional credentials, from accounting and nursing and legal and other professions to healthcare and well, I already said nurses, I guess, but early education and other places. But the spouse is a specific part of what I would recommend for your recruiting portfolio when you're trying to grow the company. For this, I know it's a simple chart, but I actually find often I am reminding locals in our UWF sort of primary market not to forget to look west. Just within a day's drive, we've got NASA and all of the space launch system just there outside of New Orleans. And certainly all the work in Gulfport and Biloxi and Keesler. But then even up north, you end up at the Air Force War College and all of the other bases that are up in there. And what a market to easily reach, be it for your own worker contract or to recruit in. And then certainly our I-10 corridor that stretches east of Tallahassee. And so to the span of University of West Florida and our credentials as not only a Center of Academic Excellence in Cybersecurity, but the Regional Resource Center, it's also important to think through UWF as a conduit. If there was something you wanted to access elsewhere in the market, the University of West Florida is one of 12 main campuses in the state university system, and we are all independent educational institutions, but we're also part of a system. And we do work together. And collegially, in the education market, we reach all 28 state colleges and community colleges, technical colleges that span the state. So there's a significant size to the market that you can access. And I would offer as a veteran entrepreneur to ask through the MVRC, ask through the Veteran Florida Entrepreneurship Program, ask through the Center for Cybersecurity. My contract requires A, B, and C, or I am looking for a person with these credentials like Stephen was describing, or maybe somebody that I could train into these credentials because I'm looking for a good teammate. We want to send them to Michelle for proper employee management, but to just remind us that we're a really big market. And so lastly, in things we scan at the Office of Military Engagement, we worry about the federal picture. It's our job. For those in the cyber market, if you haven't read the Solarium Commission, it would align a veteran entrepreneur if the veteran is interested in participating in the federal marketplace. The Solarium Commission is recent. It also states the series of 80 plus recommendations to the country on how we have to go forward in a secure manner. And the work will be aligned with those words. So this is the kind of document that is worth taking a look at. And then just so that you know the scan that we're always in, we were just looking today, the Senate Armed Service Committee, the SASC, has released its version of the NDAA for next year. So this 700 plus billion, always an ask up in the 750 billion, and then they mess with it for a while. But these are the research initiatives. So instead of detailing all the operational initiatives, which I think a veteran in the space might be able to sense, it's nice to have a priority list. Does my work touch any of these priorities? Does my work touch any of these initiatives? Should I, as a veteran entrepreneur, if I'm near a communications project, what do I know about 5G? Or, gosh, if they're going to make unmanned systems on the Gulf Coast a growing mission, do I know anything about it? Do I know something in the cyberspace about it? Can I talk to the center about a particular knowledge set? It doesn't have to always be a class. Is there a collaboration out there in order to access what is the work? And a really neat bit of language at the very bottom of at least the Senate's version talks about creating a process for university students to access labs for even more access to what is future work and therefore future funding. So I just wanted to give a military overview, knowing that so much of this particular webinar was well covered by Michelle with that personal and singular employee view, which is, I guess, where the vulnerability lies with all of us in companies, and then certainly Stephen's position in the center, which is the flagship here for cybersecurity and its access, not only in federal, but in private market as well. So I'll pause there. I know we're ending the hour, getting close to it, but there's your military overview as well.
This is really wonderful. Thanks, Chris. So I'm going to ask you to give us 2 pieces of great news about the Emerald Coast. Can you share something with us?
Sure. Two pieces of good news. I have more than two pieces of good news.
I know you do.
So I think the ecosystem itself is something I hear complimented, and for the listeners on this Zoom, we are complimented often. We actually are a real community. We're a real ecosystem. I know Jim Rhodes is on the line. I'm sure he's nodding as well. We see it from contractors and vendors. They go, man, you guys are really what we want to grow up and be. And we're thinking, well, you're from DC. You're kind of a big deal. And so the ecosystem is something that I think is great news. So remind ourselves that we're leading. We're not following. So that's one. Quarry Station, maybe as a crown jewel, is a really good piece of good news. All things at Quarry Station are in expansion mode at the DHS level, at the Navy level. They're expanding in headcount, which is job count. They're expanding in square footage, which is really important. Another one, maybe local to this part of the region, is like Quarry Station probably has 5,000 positions at least, if you count all the students going through there. So scale is great news for us. Our neighbors in the Fort Walton Beach area have some opportunities for sure. I know that their scale is smaller, and as we grow together, we're a pretty big ecosystem in general. But yeah, Quarry Station, 5,000 plus people. UWF here in Pensacola is shared with a Fort Walton Beach campus. Certainly a big deal. And how about if I finish with the great news is veterans. We're one of the densest populations of veterans, not only in the state, but in the country. And that's all available in Florida's Defense Fact Book. But the veterans themselves and the talent pool are probably a great finishing comment.
Thanks, Chris. Let me just add to that a little bit of positive comment from Veterans Florida. It seems that Northwest Florida has, I guess, the greatest number of winners in every Veterans Florida pitch competition. We always place at least one of our learners from the cohort. So we're pretty excited about that. In fact, Shane Cornell was in our last entrepreneurial class cohort, and he made a comment here, Futures Park concept is what he's excited about. Can you speak to that, Chris? The Futures Park concept?
The Futures Park is a concept, and so it's got a long way to go. It is an idea that is similar and elsewhere in the country, where a community that is adjacent to a base maybe shares some property or some common funding to grow something like an innovation or tech center, tech building, tech campus. Certainly a great design. It is repeated across the country. And I know it's in the early discussion phases right now. I've seen some PowerPoints on it, but I don't know how far away it is. But anytime a community can get together and infield something like the downtown University of West Florida Center for Cybersecurity, where you can walk in off the parking lot and walk up and meet with the university without going to the main campus. Very similar desire over there in Fort Walton Beach.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, in fact, Shane is from Fort Walton Beach, so that certainly makes sense. Everybody else, any questions here? I see that our guest from India is stating that he always takes examples from Hollywood movies to make cybersecurity class a little more interesting. How to make this talking lecture in the class more practical. Well, you know, it's interesting because I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, that the government actually contracts with a lot of Hollywood studios to get some future-proofing in developing defense concepts.
I'm going to have to offer only that I am a watcher of movies as well, and I would trust that the generosity of the federal government. There's probably a lot of folks that are allowed to go in certain places and look around and get a good idea from it, which is probably where the movies come from. But I would tell you this: it is my belief in my military and federal experience that it would make you proud as a citizen and as a patriot. We are wildly ahead of probably what is portrayed in the movies.
That is very exciting. Okay. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us on this inaugural workshop between the Military and Veterans Resource Center at UWF, CyberSafe Workforce LLC, and the Center for Cybersecurity at UWF, and our very own Chris Middleton from President Martha Saunders' Office of Military Liaison. Everybody, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please email us at vfep@uwf.edu. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Bye. Okay. There we go.